Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Enrollment for fall semester at AHE is underway. There have been lots of recent changes in our offerings. Professional programs now start at $16,000. Early enrollment discounts are available until May 15th. Get your application in and chat with the admissions team. Your journey starts now.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
It
and
is
good
afternoon,
evening.
isn't it? It's just on noon here.
Now, there's many things that we got to discuss
There are a
because
lot of things. But
I was listening to the marketing team talking about.
which is really, it's really one person.
Well, that's the marketing team.
Actually, it's two. It's Kaylee and Sherry. Sherry is the maker of all things beautiful and messaging and all of that. And Kaylee adds the spunk and understands the algorithms and other stuff. I don't know how to describe.
But they're also young people, and they were saying to me something which bewildered me, and I have to talk about it.
Everything bewilders you. Are you talking about the eyebrows?
And they were watching a YouTube video.
TikTok, I think.
TikTok. And they watched somebody shave their eyebrows and then put on.
She waxed them.
She waxed them.
In their entirety. I said, well, I shaved my eyebrows when I think I was in like the 5th or 6th grade, because being an Italian girl, I only had one. I had a unibrow. And I looked like Groucho Marx, but it was just with one, and I wanted the middle part gone.
Totally.
And so I took my mother's razor, and I went like that to try and do it, but it was way too wide.
Wow.
And I looked nuts. I mean, I looked like an alien. Yeah.
How old were you?
I think I was young, like maybe 6th grade or something like that.
Like that's 8?
No, I would have been like 10 or 12 or something. But anyway.
So you had a unibrow and you were 10.
I had a unibrow when I was born. I mean, most Italian girls do. Anyway, let's just move on.
Moving on. Oh, anywho, yeah, I had to get that out.
And you're one to talk, because I can see one of your eyebrows is 1.5 feet out from your face.
No, but that's...
Nah.
I cultivate that.
Yes, you do.
Even fertilize it sometimes.
You work that... Okay, let's get serious here. So I was mesmerized by this conversation about how much junk there is on TikTok. And I was like, you're just coming around to that. Because you don't really look at the TikTok.
Well, my social media feed... Well, hang on. My social media feeds.
Your social
My
media
news is curated. My YouTube is curated. And it basically lands me kind of where I want to be.
Yeah, but your YouTube, and we'll move on from this in a minute. Yes, you have all the cricket videos. You have all of the
great All Black victories.
Yep, the All Blacks. So you've got the cricket, you've got the rugby.
What else is there?
The airplane. You like to watch airplane landings and things like that. But you also have an entire channel dedicated to Cardi B and the Kardashians.
Yeah. No, you've got to keep up. Right, keep up.
So I want to be clear that when you say your YouTube is curated, it is a peculiar curation that suits you.
I think we should move on.
I was just getting warmed up. We go from there to James Tyler Kent.
Yeah,
Which really, if we're going to talk about it. So for those who are on...
We've got these books. Have we got the same book?
No, I actually chose mine.
Yours and mine
because I have all my... This is Lesser Writings, Clinical
Writings. Cases,
New Remedies, Aphorisms, and Precepts. And for anyone who's watching it on video, look at that mustache. Seriously. Wow. It's like a broom.
You're right. I wasn't anticipating talking about Kent. That wasn't the purpose of grabbing the books.
Except that the books that we're reading from are Kentian.
Well, but have we talked about Kent before?
We talk about Kent a lot, but we always say we're not going to go to the length of Kent's weird. But could we, if we're going to talk about Kent, I think we have to acknowledge, I think we've talked about the fact that it has been put forth that potentially Kent, James Tyler Kent, was born Gibson. Of siblings.
Yeah. The The evidence for that is that I believe on the death certificate, whoever filled in the death certificate put his parents as brother and sister. And this is a factoid that got picked up by Gibson, Gibson, who when in the late 90s or early 90s, mid 90s,
1890s.
No, 1990s,
Just
was
checking.
traveling and teaching.
I don't know anything about this part.
Yeah, so you know, the homeopathy that was being taught around the world pretty much in the 70s and the 80s was what we would describe as Kentian homeopathy, and
Or post-Kentian.
yeah, and so you know, pretty much 4th edition, pretty and a lot of emphasis on the philosophy book. Gibson is a German, I believe, a German homeopath, and he taught a couple of things that were really, really important. First was he just felt that it was necessary to write an imbalance, and the imbalance was, well, hang on, long before Kent was the great homeopath Bönninghausen and, of course, Hahnemann. And so he said, we need to just, you know, put Kent in a bit of perspective. And here's the perspective. And the perspective was, well, there might have been a bit of incest, which is, for me, pretty irrelevant.
That's not pretty irrelevant. That's not like second cousin. Brother and sister, that's flowers in the attic.
Can you say that? We said it.
I think you can say that. People, if you know, you know.
Right. So there's that.
I'm curious,
the other thing.
anybody who knows flowers in the attic, I don't want to say fans, but people who grew up with that being a part of our, you know. Did Flowers in the Attic make it to New Zealand? Like, did you know about that before I told you?
No.
You didn't?
No. What's it in? Tell me again, because I forgot.
It's a series of books about these children whose mother left them with their grandparents, the grandmother, I think, maybe grandparents. And they lived up in the attic. There were, I think, 3 siblings. And they built a whole world there. They never came out of the attic.
Wow.
And then then they grew up, and the 2 oldest ones, you know, explored and had a baby, I think. I'm pretty sure. Now, I mean, I remember
This is high-end American literature?
I'm not sure it fits into the category of literature, actual literature, but these were...
The great...
What I wonder is, where did I discover these in the library in my grammar school, like in my proper Catholic grammar school,
Right.
without someone knowing? I wonder, because it was, you know, and this would have been in grammar school, not high school, so up until age 13.
Right.
Right?
Wow.
But all I know is
I'm
that
speechless.
I read them all. Anyway.
I was reading Great New Zealand Victories in the rugby when I was 13.
Okay, anyway, let's go back
Let's
to
move
Kent.
on. I'm sorry.
So Kent may have been... I mean, is it relevant? Is it irrelevant?
Well, it's interesting that in an age where everyone had kids, he didn't have any kids. So there were no children. That's the other thing that Gibson
With a
says.
couple of wives.
3.
3 wives, yeah.
And he also mentions... There's one other factoid. Kent's first publication, his first book was called On Sexual Neuroses.
Yes, it is.
And it's quite a book.
I've read it. It is, yeah. I mean, it's not a bodice ripper, let's put it that way. No, I read it, and I actually reference from it when I teach the lecture on hysteria. And I talk about, I forgot about that. I talk about Kent in that. I'm going to just grab Winston here because he has a picture. You go on. I'm going to find... Because if we're going to...
So when I was a small child...
This shouldn't be... You know what? This is kind of like Strange, Rare, and Peculiar After Dark. We're kind of getting into that, and it's...
Well, here's what I was going to do,
it's
because
new.
I was going to begin by reading a random aphorism. One of the things about Kent is that we all know his material... Look, he covered the ground. He... wrote the repertory, had the repertory written, edited, you know, but anyway, it's got his name on it. He has his lectures on materia medica, and he's got his lectures on philosophy, all of which transcribed by students from his lectures.
We should be doing that. We should be capitalizing on student labor for this sort of thing. I did actually put out a call for notes from my clinics recently, so maybe we are doing that. You may proceed.
Thank you. So one of the lesser-known books is the Lesser Writings, and one of the other ones is Minor Writings, and they were both published after his death, about 10 years afterwards, in the early 1920s, I think. And so towards the back, there are Kent's aphorisms.
I really like that.
And yeah, they're not numbered like, Hahnemann's, and they're not, it's not written in the aphoristic style. These are pithy statements. Pithy. For example, if you do not use your homeopathy, you will lose it. Use it or lose it. This is a responsibility so great that where one has gone into the truth, capital T, and does not make use of this knowledge, he will or she will become like Egypt of old.
So I think so I know what you're going to say about this. You say what you're going to say, and then I'm going to add to it.
What I wanted to say about that is that even if... So I was teaching a class this week on... it was part of our business suite, and it was on finances, which is kind of ironic. And what I realized is I needed to understand kind of who was the listener. And in the class, we worked out there were 5 distinct types of student who were moving through and then about to graduate and then go into, join the homeopathic profession. But it was interesting because there were folks that had the wolf at the door. Right?
What do you mean?
Meaning,
I got to earn a living.
I got to earn a living. I have to make this work.
Yeah.
Me. Then there was, I think we ended up calling beer.
Beer?
the beer category, which is, my partner, my loving partner, is, say, retired or in the military, and life is sweet from a financial point of view. So this is beer money.
Beer money.
Right?
I like that.
Yeah, or holiday money. And so I'm going to do it, but it's not like I don't have to do it. And so
Which is how it used to be a lot. You had a lot of, back in the day, third career people, right? Who were just,
Right. So there was, essentially 5 different categories, and then we were going through the material and then, just thinking about it. But part of the conversation is, see, for some people, some students and then graduates, if this is to be a living, then you got to do some planning. There's got to be some strategy involved, like how many clients do I need to see? How many years can I make a loss before, I need to be making this work? And, what is it? There's lots of questions. What sort of a living do you want? How many clients do you have in your in the amount of space you've got for your work, and are you doing any other kind of work, which is also providing an income. So many questions. And when I read that, if you do not use your homeopathy, you're going to lose it. What that means to me is that even if it's one client, that one client will keep this knowledge and the truth with the capital T alive. So it doesn't need to be 25 hours of client contact a week, or 40 hours, or I don't know how many hours a week. When you were in full-time practice, how many hours of client contact did you have a week? More than I should have. So what does that mean?
Well, because it's a lot, and then all of the interim things. But I would say, we talk about a full-time homeopathy practice being about 20 hours.
Interesting.
20 client hours, like FaceTime hours.
Right.
Because
so that
then
makes
there's all
sense.
the stuff. But I feel like I definitely, at the peak of it, like I'm thinking about when I was living in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And then I was teaching on the weekends.
When I was humming, when my practice was, and that was it, I pretty much would need to see about 20 names on my calendar in the week.
Yeah, that's like the...
Maybe a couple of firsts and then, 18 or 20 follow-ups. And that to me felt like pretty, well, it actually felt overwhelming at the end.
But that's what I was thinking too. Yeah. It's a lot.
Like it's a lot.
That's why we talk a lot about the 3-legged stool. Like when I teach my part of the business suite, having the 3-legged stool, 3 different things that you do to keep yourself sharp and working in, keep your kind of mind active and earning a living, but also not being so dependent on just seeing clients that you burn out, because I think that can be tough.
Did you find what you're looking for?
I found several things that I'm looking for.
So let's go back. Let's reverse. Because you were talking about Kant and
Well,
sexual
but
neurosis.
when you're, yeah, this, you know, how many times have I said, okay, but we're not going to do this today, but you brought it up.
Totally.
Okay, but I want to say that when you're talking about, one thing that came to my mind when you talked about this sort of use it or lose it is the people that feel like they need to take a remedy all the time or give a remedy to a family member or whatever in a use it or lose it.
Oh, right.
Right.
Totally different context, huh?
Yeah, we had a client this week in clinic that we prescribed a remedy vacation because
I heard that,
such a lovely person and had been of the mind that for any ailment, any feeling, even during the day, a remedy would be the answer, and he was taking several different remedies even inside of a day. And his response was different than what we would have expected. It was good. Lots of his symptoms had gotten better, but he sort of felt this sort of exacerbation. And we're like, let's just take a little remedy vacation. And he was good with it. Yeah. Anyway, along those lines, so if we're talking Kent, and I chose...
Can I just also mention that Denise is doing something which many homeopaths do, and that's balancing 3 books on her knee.
With a cup of tea. Right, I have 3 books, and I've got them, like, if you're on video, like, it all set up. And then you see, I went for my one because I always have stickies. And then I find a book with stickies, and I'm like, I remember when I was writing that lecture or whatever lecture. Anyway, this one, if you've got your own Kent, which one is this? Is this a Bijane? Yeah, this is a Bijane. And it's on page 227. This is, Kent says, nosode. The nosode tendency is becoming altogether too extravagant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Kent said that.
Kent said that. He says, I've known meteorinum to be given and fail, where thuya would have cured promptly, because the symptoms were predominantly thuya and not meteorinum. I have known psorianum to be given because the case was supposed to be due to psora, where sulfur was well indicated. It is a great error to prescribe for the miasm instead of the totality of the symptoms. If the symptoms are very scanty and the remedy is doubtful and the patient has a history of gonorrhea, his symptoms having come on since, it is a hopeful experiment to give meteorinum. In a similar manner, if there's a history of syphilis with a paucity of symptoms, it's a good experiment to give syphilinum. Most certainly, we must rise above miasmatic prescribing. Yet the miasm should be held in view, and the remedy should be held in view, and the remedies that fit the symptoms should also be deep enough to cure the corresponding miasm. Thanks, JT.
Nice.
I mean, that's really, really... Gosh, well, Kent would have arrived in the very early phase of, well, yeah, not really. Kent would have arrived, not in the early phase. This would have been after Swan and Berridge had their way with getting the nosodes in.
Yeah.
And a lot of the information about the nosodes, and I was actually surprised to read this. I used to think of Swan as a reliable proving master, and I was doing research. I think it was when I was working on my thesis. I came across this thing on morbillinum, which is the measles nosode, where Swan says, "Yeah, we don't need to do a proving on this remedy because we essentially have a proving from all of the clinical symptoms." Right? I think he says something like, "Nature has provided already for us in the plethora of people who have had these symptoms," and it was like, except the aphorism 153 part, right? And I mean, not just that. Now, that's the characteristic symptoms to the point of strange, rare, and peculiar. You can't just go by clinical symptoms. I mean, you get a lot of information, but not all of it. Anywho, I thought that miasm thing was good, and I have another one, but I have to. Oh wait, maybe it's right here.
So all of that came from Use It or Lose It, Kent's sexual neuroses, and...
Well, I haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay, so that's the place you need to get to.
I'm getting to. I have it right here. And sorry for the background noise, guys.
Yeah.
We've got some work going on here, and we decided that we would just allow you to be in our world. We had our pantry in our kitchen collapsed. It's a 4-foot wide, like tall floor to ceiling pantry, and the shelves inside one side collapsed, and a few months later on the other side collapsed. And it was full, it was a pantry, so it was full of like glass jars full of stuff, and so it was So we had it rebuilt, and now it's getting repainted, and it's very lovely. Anyway, I digress, because I'm sort of debating here on, but you brought up Kent having written, so Kent, and I'm looking here, you can find information about this. This is in Julian Winston's Faces of Homeopathy, page 158. He talks about Kent before homeopathy, and he's talking about Kent having come into homeopathy from his experience as an eclectic physician, and how that eclecticism, influenced his practice. And actually, it's interesting because he quotes a whole bunch of Matthew Wood. Matthew Wood, who's his cousin. Matthew Wood is Julian Winston's cousin. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And Matthew Wood is an herbalist. He lives in Minnesota. And I met him in a very funny way when I was living in Minnesota in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I was there from 2000 to 2001 to 2006, I think. Anyway, my youngest went to preschool, and I used to drop him off, and I would go to this cafe. And I met this woman who worked at the cafe who was pregnant. And I got to, talk to her when I would go in there every day. And she said, I'm actually going to go back to Philadelphia to have my baby. And then it turns out that she had a Swedenborgian midwife, Kent having been a Swedenborgian, who was trained in the lineage of James Tyler Kent. And I went, wait a second. It was the same midwife that delivered one of my kids.
Wow.
I know. Look, I got a little thumbs up on there. Anyway, so that was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then she said, and then we started talking about homeopathy, because Barbara, who my midwife, is a homeopath. And then she says, do you know who that is? That's Matt Wood. And I was like, I got all dumbfounded. I was like, oh, really? And so then I went over and I introduced myself, which I know I don't seem shy to people who know me in my public persona, but I'm actually quite an introvert, and I can be very shy.
You were starstruck.
I was totally starstruck. I was the nicest guy. Yeah, and so then we would sit together and have coffee on a regular basis. Anyway, so that was really awesome.
Nice.
But what's really funny is I opened up my radar today, and there's a picture of Matt Wood on there.
Yeah.
Because he's now doing. There's some reference material. Yep. There are some reference materials about his herbal work and homeopathy. Do I have that right? I forget.
Yeah, some interface between herbalism and homeopathy.
Yeah. Anyway, so I thought that was kind of fun. Anyway, so if you don't know about Matthew Wood, he wrote a book that the first title of it was called The Magical Staff, and then it was republished and named Vitalism. And
yes,
yeah. And it's a great book. If you're not familiar with the vitalistic tradition and sort of and I'm not convinced Hahnemann was a vitalist, just for full disclosure. I think he comes from a different lineage. I don't think that he was against vitalism in any way, but that wasn't his sort of guiding light.
We're going into a different cul-de-sac, and I know that you're going to talk about the rectal applicator, but
I am.
Page 1.
It's on 158. It's on the same page where.
So let's just hold that, because how can you say that? That's got to be nonsense.
What nonsense?
Because
you're talking about Hahnemann as a vitalist.
Yeah, because
or
the whole way.
Or the rectal applicator.
No, the as a vitalist, because the whole way through all of his works, he talks about
the vital force.
The vital force has been critical in the healing response.
Yeah.
How can he not be a vitalist?
Do you want to go down this, or do you want to go to rectal applicator?
We could, as you say, we could hold two totalities at the same time.
What I said was I don't think that was his driving factor. Like, there are people who look at homeopathy as part of the vitalistic tradition, which sort of has a different lineage. Hahnemann definitely totally acknowledged vitality, the vital force, and all of the ways in which it animates us. I mean, he used, a better way to state it is that he used the descriptive language that the vitalists would have used.
Totally, yeah.
But he came in through a different door. He would have walked along that path, but
he was a modern medical scientist.
He was an alchemist. He was a medical alchemist.
Well,
yes, and to your point, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So you're saying three things.
Well, remember, Hahnemann lived at that juncture between Hippocratic medicine and biomedicine. And the thread that he would have continued through would have been that what became known as the vitalistic part of that ancient tradition. But you see, once you start looking at for example, the balance of the elements. Yeah. So now now we didn't just like take a cul-de-sac. Now it's like one of those clover leaves with 2 layers of road on it, right?
I need more tea.
Yeah. I would say that Hahnemann was, he was incorporating lots of pieces of the different traditions in his own framework. So, for example, the elements, right? You know how sometimes some teachers like Misha has the Mappa Mundi, Jeremy teaches the circle. Both of those are in some ways derived from Joseph Reeves and his application of that. And that's sort of a 4 elements way of looking at a case and matching it to a remedy, right?
Yeah, it's looking, if homeopathy is an energetic medicine, you need an energetic map, and that's an energetic map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that's one layer,
Uh-huh.
and that Hahnemann was not just looking at it from that one dimension, but rather how to, oh gosh, it's such a big topic, it's hard to, so if to reach the aphorism 9, bingo, where we reach our soul's highest potential, right? Mm-hmm. One of the ways that gets done is by the removal of the energetic disturbances that keep us sick and unable to, right? Kent says a man in health is unaware of his parts, right? I love that.
Yeah.
So homeopathy sort of evolved with many people thinking that you had to find the one remedy, the simillimum idea, yeah? And you would find that one remedy, like a person's soulmate in nature, and then you levitate and everything. I mean, that's, or you run from your wheelchair, or, you become sighted if you're blind, like all the things, right? And so it can't be true. That concept cannot be true to Hahnemann. He never talked about it.
Right, okay.
And he rebukes it in Aphorism 171.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So all of those things. That's a modern idea.
Uh-huh.
Right? Okay. I think that what Hahnemann was working towards was a balance, an elemental balance within the individual. In other words, it wasn't you needed one remedy, you needed balance. One piece of evidence that I put toward that is in the psoric triad, for example, right? The 3 remedies in the psoric triad would be sulfur, calcaria carbonicum, and lycopodium, right? So you've got sulfur, the mineral, you got lycopodium, the plant, and calcarb, he chose to take the middle layer of an oyster shell. He could have gotten calcium carbonate. He was a chemist.
Yeah.
But he chose to make it an animal.
Yeah.
Which says to me that you've got 3 kingdoms, right, that he looks at as the potential removal of psora.
Yeah.
Or that are the 3 main anti-psorics is a better way to put it.
Yep.
So that is another clue that it's not just one way, but it also gives us this idea that perhaps Hahnemann was looking at the various anti-miasmatic remedies as coming from different places in order to achieve balance. Or an even better way to look at it is maybe a person is deficient in certain amount of plant, a certain amount of mineral, a certain amount of whatever, animal or whatever. It's just a thought. And it's the reason that I'm being a little cagey in how I'm talking about it is that you have to see it in one way and also through the lens of understanding miasm theory. So I don't want to go too off the wall, but
yeah, the thing that I still don't get why you would say that he's not a vitalist.
I'm saying he embraced vitalistic tradition, but was not per se exclusively a vitalist.
Right. Okay. Well, exclusively, I think you're right. I mean, by postulating and then the existence of millions of tiny animals causing disease.
Right.
That is not. That's a number of steps away from vitalism.
It's totally a number of steps away from vitalism. I think that because of the time he was in, that he got swept up into it would have been a part of the conversation. Like he's a contemporary of Goethe, right? So, all of these things were happening at the same time. Can we get back to the regular applicator? No. So Kent... So I have so many feelings about our dear Dr. Kent.
Yeah.
And one of them is just how he got how he came to be, right? And so he comes from, like, forget about whether or not his parents were siblings, right?
Sure.
And who knows? I mean, and, you know, I don't want to diss on people who might want to marry their sister, like, far be it from me. Okay, but Kent he got to homeopathy with a whole set, he came with baggage, let's just say.
Yeah.
Yeah? And so part of the baggage, and baggage doesn't have to be bad, right? It's just like when we talk about biases. Your bias is it's just your opinion. Like, my bias is I place Hahnemann in a particular category, and I see things through that lens. Yeah? Okay. So Kent comes in with his Swedenborgian background, right? So do you want to talk about Emanuel Swedenborg a little bit?
Well, he doesn't have a Swedenborgian background. He discovers Swedenborg
Oh, right, true. He
from
comes
his
in with
second wife.
Yeah, he comes in with his eclectic background.
Right. And he's
Thank
got an eclectic medical background, 2 years of medical education, wherever it was. I think it's Cincinnati, I think. And then his second wife gets ill, and she says, "Leave me alone. I want that doctor
Right.
from church." And that doctor from church is a Swedenborgian, and he fixes her up, although she subsequently dies later. And that's a turning point for Kent, because Kent saw in Swedenborgian Christianity a new way of languaging Hahnemannian homeopathy. And so Swedenborg, Swedish mystic from long dead, I'm going to say 1700,
1600, 17th century.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that those people that were part of the Swedenborgian church, a strong percentage of them were physicians. So, like, if you were a doctor in 1870 and you went to church, it's likely you would go to the Swedenborgian church. And there's one of the reasons for that is because Swedenborg talks about what I would describe as individuation, that you're actually here for a reason, and that reason is to refine yourself and work on yourself on a regular basis. And that refinement is also not just manifests as, oh, I'm a nicer person to be around, but it manifests as I'm energetically different as well, and I am now in contact with God. You know, it would be in that sort of language. So Kent's language around vital force was different to Hahnemann's because it's Swedenborgian language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, you know, Swedenborg says, you know, stuff like, you know, if you're in contact with God, then you're healthy.
Yep.
And if you've got a wart or a rash, then actually the cause of that is not because of a lack of balance. It's that you're disconnected from God.
Yep. Which then influenced Kent's ideas around homeopathy, which is the higher potencies get you higher to the spiritual realm, and that a homeopathic remedy affects a person at the level of the will. In other words, if you change your will, your will, which would be geared toward, you know, naughty, left to your own human devices, can be changed to make you a better spiritual person.
Right. And there is a bunch of moralism and
Oh,
moralizing in
which brings us to
all of that.
so
There's the because
Boy.
in other words, that what Swedenborg and then what Kent was saying is that at the end of the day, yep, physical disease manifests in the body, but choice comes first. And at the end of the day,
you make a bad choice.
You make a bad choice. That's the challenge. That's the issue.
Well, which is really interesting because if you go back in ancient medicine, that's where it all begins. You know, like when I teach the trajectory of medicine through the lens of pans and pandas, right? I do this as part of my autoimmune suite, right? So one of the things that we look at is in the very beginning, disease is caused by a poor relationship with God. If you reconcile, you know, and that's why somebody who had a case of St. Vitus dance, right, and epileptic chorea, yeah, then they could touch the reason they called it St. Vitus dance was because you could touch the relic of St. Vitus, who was a 4th century saint. You touched a relic and then you were cured, right? So in a way, the Swedenborgian idea is sort of connected to, you know, old school, get right with God. Anyway, but Kent had brought like all this, you know, there was all this morality at play, and I didn't quite understand it until I read the book on sexual neuroses. And if you're interested in reading it, you can go to, what's that? Gosh, I haven't used it in a little while, that the online library, what's it called? Where you can download PDFs of old books. It'll come to me, or we'll put it in the show notes. Anyway, but I downloaded a PDF of it, and it's called On Sexual Neuroses. And Kent talks about sort of people can be predisposed, so sort of a constitutional failure would be a predisposition toward an overemphasis on sex. I'm quoting here from the innate or uncaused condition, which is so commonly found among the young, is quite likely congenital and constitutional. There is evidently structural malformation in the neuralgia, not neuralgia, or nerve cells proper, which predisposes the child to, and then he goes on. Yeah. So he felt that this needed to be fixed, and he was sort of in the same way that hysteria, right? That all female diseases were caused by the uterus, which it comes from the Greek word, like hysterectomy, right? So hysteria comes from a problem with the uterus, and that the ancient people thought that the uterus would just move around a woman's body causing trouble, and they needed to find a way to get the uterus back in place, right? So there were all kinds of things that were done. I wish I knew we were going to go in this direction. I have so much material on this anyway, but just... So
next week.
We'll just shortcut. There's always next week.
But let us have your questions.
Yeah, and Kent, he writes about nymphomania, and it's the worst form of disease, and all sorts of issues. Anyway, but I think it's ironic. I'm just going to say it's ironic that a man who had so much opinion about people's proclivities also designed a rectal.
He designed it?
Yeah, a rectal applicator.
Kent's rectal applicator.
Yeah. This is... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I totally lie. He wrote a review about...
Take that back.
I take it back. He didn't design it.
I
hereby take back what I said in a previous edition of this.
I have misspoke.
In managing some forms of nervous affections, attention is drawn to induration and other structural changes of the anus and rectum as a primary cause. And Kent believes that the way to deploy medicine for the optimal, curative possibility in this arena is through this
it's very French.
application. It is very French.
Yeah.
They love talking about their caca.
Oh, it's not so much that. It's that if you want an area of the body with a rich blood supply to get something from the outside to the inside, then the suppository is the way to go.
I mean,
I hear.
You take it on good advisement. Anyway, so when, in all of these times when we were talking about Kent, and I was like, and then there's Kent's weird, yeah? I always wanted a six-toed cat that I could call Kent. It felt just right to me. Anywho.
A six-toed cat.
Named Kent. Yeah.
We're a bit naughty in this.
This is not... How did this happen today?
I don't know.
This was not meant to go that way.
Yeah. All I wanted was just to have a chat about an aphorism.
And look where I took us.
But I'm totally happy next week. Let's remember to talk about
more Kent.
Well, some of the the sexual neuroses, cul-de-sac. But why don't we focus on his moralism? You cannot divorce medicine and theology, he says. That's an interesting one because since the mid-1700s, theology and medicine had been systematically divorced. Man exists, and woman, exists all the way down. It's interesting, all the way down, from his innermost spiritual to the outermost natural. But in other words, you cannot practice homeopathy unless you go to church, unless you embrace theology. But
can we... Okay, let's talk about the positive side of that, because I think in Kent's terms... Right, he had a very particular way in which morality should play out.
Yeah.
But I would argue that there's a reason why people of faith find their way to homeopathy, because there is a way in which the basis on universal laws makes sense to people who are, spiritually in alignment. That said, how many concrete sequentialists do we find in the homeopathy world?
I have no idea what you mean. What does that mean?
Like a materialist, a real...
Once when I was living in England, I don't think I told you this story.
Are you sure?
No.
We've gone down a naughty road already.
Well, I think and I worked in I worked in the store, and then I worked in the clinic, and on a Monday and a Thursday or something like that. And this acupuncturist did the same shifts, and so every now and again there's cancellation, or you meet each other in the corridor, or and the thing was that he was a telephone engineer by training, and he was the most reductionistic, materialistic natural medicine practitioner I've ever seen. Really? He saw the body like a telephone, and the wires, an old telephone.
Yeah, right, climb the pole.
And I have no idea what his name was, but he was a complete anathema to me. Lovely bloke and very, very busy, and but yep. That was just wires we are wires that are all joined together. Have you ever seen a picture of that mechanical duck?
The mechanical duck? No. I thought you were going to talk about the pictures, which they used to be in here. Now I don't know where they hang. Upstairs. Oh, there they are along the wall. They're pictures of the meridians and proving symptoms.
No, there's no meridians. It's a homeopath called Greg, 2 G's.
Yeah.
Or 3 G's.
Right. That's funny.
It is, thank you.
Yeah.
In his spare time, went through the provings and focused on pain, and then drew the pain on the outline of a body. And so there's 5 really beautiful, I think they're woodcuts, I'm making it up, but in the card proving, the pain by one of the provers would be described as starting at the bottom of the sternum and going up to the throat. And so he drew that. And he drew it like an arrow, indicating the direction of the pain as well, when there was direction.
I love that.
And so...
Are they still available?
These pictures?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, how did I get them? I think I got them from Julian.
Winston.
Yeah.
I love them.
Anyway, no, I wasn't going to say that. What was I going to say? Something else. But it's escaped me.
We were talking about concrete materialists and
Yeah.
sequentialists. Here's the thing that this might go down as our weirdest podcast ever, but maybe this ends season 2. He says, here's one. Measles and smallpox are not on the outside. Man is protected on the outside and is attacked from the inside when there is susceptibility. Yes, except if there's an epidemic, when the velocity of the... Right? So he really differs from Hahnemann in so many ways. I mean, obviously susceptibility is an issue. I don't want to minimize that. But to choose measles and smallpox, right? The Native Americans who got the smallpox blankets on them, who, got smallpox and died, it was not because of their susceptibility. Yeah, it was the velocity of a novel pathogen for which the organism doesn't have the capacity. Anyway, there's a lot more to be said on that. But here's one that really got me. Well, there's a physician above all men, if not innocent, should be anything else but a doctor. A bad man has only coarse, vicious ideas of the human heart. Wow. When a man thinks from the microscope and his neighbor's opinion, he thinks falsely.
Wow.
Yeah. Nothing good can come from this. Evil must take place, and changes, which are the ultimates of his internal thought, will take place in the body. He and Herring must have had some...
Really interesting point. Herring owning the world's most expensive microscope.
$750 in 19th century money. That's a lot.
Let's say he bought it in 1860?
Yeah.
So 1816, it was $750.
So I'm not recalling the overlapping time of Kent. I mean, Kent was a member of the IHA, which I think is really interesting.
They barely overlapped. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. I tried to work that one out myself. I think there's a couple of...
in the journals.
Somewhere in the abstracts,
Yeah.
the conference abstracts, there's definitely Kent and Herring overlapped, but Herring dies in
1880.
1880.
1888, 1880. Wait.
He died.
He was born in 1900.
And he was 80.
Yeah, so he died in 80. I just had all the blood drained out of me. That's
You okay?
Well, it's just knowledge I should know. And I also just read something.
Hang on.
Here.
And so Kent, I need my lecture notes, but I think he graduates in 1873, 4, 2, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So he's starting to, as a young aspirational homeopath, starts getting going within the profession in the mid to late 1870s.
I'll tell you what, I haven't gone through this with a fine-tooth comb since I settled in on my research. So it's very interesting. I'm reading this as if some of it as if new. Like, the old philosophers were engaged in constant controversy, here converging, there diverging. If they had only known something of simple substance, as does the homeopath, they would have had confirmation. Such a
These aphorisms are really different to Hahnemann's, aren't they?
Oh, totally.
Hahnemann, it's like step, 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 step. These are pithy statements. Maybe just I wonder if it's students that went through their notebooks.
Like I asked the students recently to send me what is often called clinical gems for other people. I'm not suggesting that, mine are that, but that's what we call it. Like, what are the little things you pick up, little tidbits?
You come up with clinical gems every now and again.
Kaylee said last night in the thing, the Denise in my pocket. That's me yelling, nah! But I because I'm working on my, case analysis book. And so, I don't remember what I say in clinic half the time. So, and I've thought about doing some recordings, but I haven't. Anyway, let's
have one last aphorism.
One last aphorism.
Like, close your eyes and put your finger on the book, like as if you're going to a place in the world pointing at a map.
Aura is a means by which warning is given between spheres, between plants and objects, between animals and persons. Objects are related to each other and give out. We find affinity and repulsion by this aura.
Wow. That's
like a Zen koan.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I never really thought about how, every body has its atmosphere, just as the earth has its atmosphere. It is not the smallpox crust that is so dangerous. It is the aura which emanates from it. And he capitalizes aura. Oh, I see. Because I picked this, it's out of order. These are not in a real order, but they've been arranged in some order. One of the things that I'm really interested in going back around is looking at what he means when he says simple substance versus primitive substance. I'll get back to you on that.
Good.
Yeah.
There's your agenda for the week.
This was weird.
It was a little random.
Well, I said, what are we going to talk about? And you said, the eyebrows. I was like, it's not a podcast, because I want to get the books, I want my sticky notes, I want to be prepared. He's like, no, I want to talk about the eyebrows, the waxing of the eyebrows. And I thought, that's just... But of course, if we're going to talk about something that weird, it's going to lead to Kent. Yeah. And as I always say, I just have mixed feelings about Kent.
Yeah, me too. And I would say that Gibson did his job.
Where do we find... I don't know this person. This Gibson?
Gibser. Gypser. Gibser.
Oh, like a gypsy.
No, Gibser.
I know, but it's spelled like a gypsy.
He did the job that he set out to do, which was to place Kent. Situate Kent in a broader conversation about
do we have
homeopathy and its origins.
Yep. I have not seen this. Is this something that... Didn't Francis Troy Hertz do his thesis on Kent?
Yes, master's thesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
I have not read that, and I want to.
Yeah. I have read it. I use it because I teach, Kent maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Yeah. And so I use it and I'm a bit familiar with it. And it's interesting because there's a Jewish component to the rebuttal of Kent's Swedenborgian Christianity. It's really interesting.
I mean, that's something that I love about him.
And, yeah.
Wow. Kent. So we've been talking about, we're going to talk about Kent, and then instead of preparing to talk about Kent, we just talked about Kent. I'm wholly unsatisfied. I need to do it again.
All right.
With gusto.
Folks, see you next time.
Yeah. Have
Take
a good
care.
one.
Ciao.
Home Foundation is hard at work. The Practitioner-Generated Research Network is like nothing the homeopathy community has seen before. Through the PGRN, we will be able to bring groundbreaking research to the world that will help protect homeopathy for generations to come. Learn more about how you can contribute to research at homefoundation.org. That's home, HOHM, foundation.org.